Hi guys, this video is an overview of period 1, which lasted from 8000 to 600 BCE. First, we'll be talking about the top 10 major events in this period. The first one is when cuneiform writing was invented, which was in 3300 BCE. Cuneiform was developed by the Sumerian people who lived in Mesopotamia, and it is one of the earliest forms of writing. It began as a system of pictures, and it takes years to master. And not everyone in the civilization knew how to write cuneiform. Only very few people did, and the people who did were very high on the social hierarchy, and they were known as scribes, which were very few. Next, we have the regular use of bronze in Mesopotamia and Egypt, which was from 2900 to 1500 BCE. Mesopotamians, they made improvement on stone tools by mixing imported ores such as copper and tin with arsenic, which made bronze. Then they would pour this molten material into molds that would be shaped like weapons and tools, and that's how they made their tools. And the best advantage of bronze weapons was the sharper edge that provided, which made it more deadlier. Next, we have the Egyptian Old Kingdom, which was from 2686 to 2160 BCE. It was the first peak of civilization in the Nile Valley and one of the three kingdoms. And this was a time when the Egyptians considered the king a god on earth, and they built temples and pyramids to honor them. And the Old Kingdom began with the third dynasty and ended with the sixth. Next, we have the Egyptian Middle Kingdom from 2030 to 1640 BCE. It was the second peak of Egyptian civilization, and it covered the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasties. Next, we have when the Hydes developed iron, which was in 2000 BCE. Historians believe that the Hydes were the first to use iron in tool and weapon making, and they also used this natural resource in trading with other civilizations. But before they started trading, because of its usefulness, the Hydes, they wanted to keep it very secretive, and they didn't want anybody to know about it, so they would have the upper hand. But eventually, it got out because they traded, and yeah, but they did try very hard to keep it a secret. Next, we have the Babylonian Empire, or Hammurabi's reign, from 1792 to 1750 BCE. This empire became a major power when Hammurabi merged territories of the former Akkadian Empire. The city of Babylon became the capital, and this was where Hammurabi instituted his famous law code. Next, we have the Shang dynasty from 1630 to 1046 BCE. It originated around the Yellow River and into Mongolia. It was considered a warrior aristocracy, and they were the originators of Feng Shui. Next, we have the Egyptian New Kingdom, the final kingdom, from 1550 to 1070 BCE. It was the last of the Egyptian dynasties, and this was the kingdom that began using the term pharaoh. This was also when they started to believe in the afterlife, and they wrote a book called the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It was basically about how the spirits would travel through a series of trials to determine whether or not he or she was worthy of the afterlife. Next, we have the Zhou dynasty from 1072 to 221 BCE. This actually extends into the second period. It was the longest and lasting and the most revered dynasty in Chinese history. And this dynasty actually took many aspects from the Shang culture and added it to their own. This is a very popular thing to do around in civilizations. And a notable person that came from this dynasty was Confucius, who also made Confucianism. Finally, we have the founding of Rome, which was in 753 BCE. It was founded in Italy, and a significant thing of this empire was that it was the first civilization to establish a government, which they decided on was a republic. And if Rome didn't make a republic, we would actually probably not know what a republic was today, so they were the originators. Next, we'll be talking about the top 10 individuals or people. First, we have the Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates. They made their land fertile by careful irrigation, which they invented. And they also invented the wheel, plows, and, as you mentioned before, cuneiform. Next, we have the pastoralists, which designed weapons and modes of transportation that all diffused into other river valley civilizations. Next, we have the Egyptians, which lived along the Nile River. They also created a writing system called hieroglyphics, and they used ink to write and papyrus as paper. Next, we have the Babylonians, who were ruled by Hammurabi, and Hammurabi created his famous code of laws, which the Babylonians followed. This empire lasted for 260 years. Next, we have the Indians, who also created a language called the Indus script. However, historians still have not been able to decipher it. And most houses that the Indians had water drainage systems, which other societies did not. And this was a egalitarian society, meaning everyone was equal, or mostly equal. Next, we have the Chinese, which lived beside the Yellow River Valley. This was a society based on respect to spirits, ancestors, government, and others. And Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism were the three major philosophies that the Chinese lived by. Next, we have the Aryans, who were nomadic northerners from Central Asia who migrated or invaded into the Indus River Valley. Vedas was a religious literature, and these people actually merged with the Indians. Next, we have the Phoenicians, who were notable merchants, traders, and colonizers of the Mediterranean. They were also well-known sea traders. The Phoenicians used cuneiform, but they also created their own alphabet, which consisted of 22 letters. And this actually later was adopted by the Greeks and is the ancestor of the modern Roman alphabet. Next, we have Hammurabi, who again created his famous code of laws, and he was the sixth king of the Babylonian dynasty, which ruled in central Mesopotamia. And finally, we have the pharaohs, who were political and religious leaders of Egypt. Some examples are Nefertiti, King Menes, Khufu, and Cleopatra. Finally, we have the social or cultural or political factors of period 1. First is religion, which impacted culture of all civilizations, and especially in India, government and social structure. Next, we have hierarchy, and this shaped social structure and the rights that the people had. Next, we have theocracy. Egypt and Mesopotamia had leaders who were closer to God than the rest, and both of these River Valley civilizations were very religious and saw the rulers as religious symbols. Next, we have language. Every River Valley civilization had a form of language that was used to communicate, and if actually they did not have a written language, we would not know anything about these civilizations. Next, we have trade, and River Valley civilizations traded with each other to get goods that they couldn't get by themselves, and this led to a spread of culture throughout each River Valley civilization, and they all influenced one another in aspects like art and architecture. Next, we have job specialization. Since everyone wasn't needed for farming, people developed skills such as pottery, and occupations such as artisans and government officials were created. Next, we have the advancement of technology. These River Valley civilizations, they created tools to aid them in daily life. They invented modes of transportation with the use of the wheel. Science and math was very strong in these societies, and they created many things like the 60 seconds and minutes, what we use now, and they had knowledge on how to preserve bodies, especially Egypt. Eighth, we have science. Science was very well used in these civilizations. They used it to create irrigation and plows and the wheel, and they had knowledge about medicine, which is science. Ninth, we have warfare. Pastoralists developed and used iron weapons, which were much better than bronze weapons. They were like no match for, like, iron was no match for bronze. And later, the rest of the River Valley civilizations adapted to iron because they were losing and they needed to create a stronger military and they had to protect themselves from outside attacks. And finally, we have architecture. River Valley civilizations started to build public places such as temples, and especially Egypt and Mesopotamia, they are famous for their pyramid-shaped architecture. The pyramids in Egypt were used as tombs for mummified leaders, and the ziggots were used for religious ceremonies in Mesopotamia. And all buildings created during this time period were used for religious reasons. There is actually no other reason for them. And that is it. Thank you for listening.